Hey, what's up guys? In this video I want to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about for quite some time, and the title of this video is The Future of Digital Synths. I really like digital synths. The Virus, JP8080, the Nord, anything digital. I really like it because it is this pure abstraction of something that happens in the real world that makes it unreal. And that's the only way I can kind of describe it. It's just a richness of sound. I'll give you an example. Say you have a digital distortion unit. Well, that digital distortion is based on some characteristic or reality of a circuit being, overdriven or clipped or whatever. And there's a mathematical value that can be associated with that. It's definitely not the real thing. It's an approximation. It's a very close approximation, but it can get to that peak amount and then go beyond it. It can go beyond what is possible in the same kind of flavors. You get like these really amazing sounds, and that's just really what I enjoy about them. And there's a little bit of nostalgia in there as well. A lot of the the big tracks of yesteryear use these synths, and the last 10, 12 years, the analog synth thing, as everyone has analog synth fetish, modular fetish, and not to diminish it, they're cool sounding, but they're not for me. They're not this seemingly unlimited possibility of sound and otherworldliness that you wouldn't be able to create with one of those modular synths. But there's some things that digital synths can't do that modular synths can. Anyway, I'm digressing. They're my favorite thing in the entire world. So much so that I have 3 viruses. I collect viruses. I have a Snow, Polar, and then a Virus KC back there, and I have a Nord Lead 3 and a JP8000 behind me. And those are like the 3 kind of workhorses that people have used, and I really like them, and I'm attached to them and things like that. So I really like digital synths for that reason, and a bunch of other reasons as well. And I've been disillusioned recently because there hasn't really been a push or an advancement in this area, digital programmable synths. And the Virus TI, the last major update was 2006, right? I'm talking about the TI line. I'm not sure when the TI line came out. 2006, so that's 13 years ago. 13 years, no increment in terms of another leap forward. Of course, there's been software updates and things like that, but it bums me out. And when the Virus TI came out, first time I heard it, I was just floored by this thing, the way it lights up, the way the light pulses, and the way the way the keys feel as well. It was a great thing, and the sounds that came out of it, like this recognizable sounds. And you look at the waveform, and the saw waves are kind of sinusoidal to give like that deep low end, and like so many distortion, even guitar amps, which they implemented in their Kemper Profiler, which they've switched priorities to. But that's a whole other story. I got really excited. I think it was like a year ago. There's a gentleman shopping his new synth at a trade show, and the synth was called Valkyrie, and I remember watching it, and I was like, it has been years since I've seen something like this. We have like our mini brutes with like 2 LFO sources or whatever, and like these I guess consumer get your feet wet synthesizers, things like that, Volca things. And it didn't irritate me, but it bummed me out that everyone was kind of going backwards. And there's like this analog sentiment, and is it analog? Analog, it has to be real analog, things like that. Anyway, he had the synth there. It was called Valkyrie at the time, and he was shopping for a distributor, and he arranged a deal with Waldorf. And at NAMM, look at my paper here again. NAMM, it was announced and revealed a slight different redesign. Not so much a virus form factor, but there was a redesign, and it was called Kyra. And let me tell you about this thing. Okay, so the virus synths came at a time when the digital thing, and I'm not a computer scientist, so I'm going to explain it to myself, because whatever. The virus synths use a DSP chip, which is set in stone. It's a DSP chip that you buy off the shelf, and then you program it. No, you don't program it. You work around it, and you can write some code and do some things. That's what the virus TI basically is. It's just a DSP chip that exists in a lot of other things. And DSP chips are used a lot elsewhere as well, like the UAD card, the Apollo. They have these Shark DSP chips that are specialized for audio and instructions relating to audio. And it's very rigid, so as opposed to a CPU, which can do many other things, a DSP is very specialized. Signal processing chip. Kyra uses an FPGA, a field programmable gate array. And when I first heard of that, I was like, what? I thought FPGAs were like not that great, but actually they have essentially surpassed those specialized DSP chips. The FPGAs can be programmed in a special way to do what you want to do. So much so that an FPGA in 2019 outperforms the modern virus in every way, as far as I know. And I want to go through a couple things that are just really mind-blowing, the specs on this piece of equipment. And I want to see some exciting digital synths come about, and things with, like, it has 32 times oversampling. That's pretty insane. At 24, the bit depth is 24-bit. It's 8-part multi-tempo. I wouldn't expect anything less, really. And each has their own effects chain, which is pretty cool. It has 1,200 oscillators, right? So that is the maximum amount of oscillators that you can have running. So a little bit of a I guess, crash course. If you press 3 keys, depending on the combination of voice and how many oscillators per voice, that will give you your oscillator count. If you have a long release and the release is still occurring, and then you press 2 more notes, that oscillator count is effectively doubled. So for, what was it, 128 voices, you get 10 oscillators of voice. And I'm not quite sure how the processing goes. So how it works in the virus is a square wave will be 1 voice, and then if you give it like 4 times unison and you press 1 note, that's 4 voices. An effect or a particular reverb or delay is kind of unpredictable in how it goes. A reverb could be 3 voices, it could be 5. A filter doesn't necessarily take up a voice. It's really kind of confusing how it works, and there's no like indicator about patch complexity. It's just there is an indicator, and it's like a little charging symbol. It has 4 kind of lines, like they're like reception bars. It's like, so if you have 4 of them maxed up, you have a very complex patch. It's pretty confusing. But allegedly, oh, I'm gonna get to that. Allegedly, so allegedly the polyphony is guaranteed, and that that is guaranteed, so there'll be no note stealing. So a thing that can happen with the virus with a complex patch is, like I said before, if you're doing a 3-note chord, or 6-note chord, or whatever you're doing, or you're playing you're playing multiple parts through the same unit through different outputs, and you have like a long release of like a pad or something, and that decay continues to go, right? It decays out, and then you press another note, it runs out of notes, it effectively kills that release time. So you have like a release time that just stops. Or, something will happen. It's called note stealing. And it's just how the DSP works. You know, uh, it's complex patches are complex patches, and we expect them to be complex and take up a lot of computations. And I haven't really come into that. I haven't really ran into that use that much, or that issue that much, but it is an issue. And if you have like a very like large patch, that's why you want to like record and commit things to audio, and then keep the patch, things like that, and then mute it. Something that's really interesting. So like I said, yeah, 120 voices, and that's 10 oscillators per voice, and that is with polyphony that's guaranteed. Available wavetables is, there's one figure that says that it's 3,000, and another said that there's 4,096 different wavetables, and you have the ability to import wavetables. So that is pretty crazy. That's a lot of sound. And Waldorf has their wavetable. I'm sure they'll bring those in, things like that, and it's really crazy how much. And like each of those can just be FM. Oh, I'm gonna get to that. So the typical things, it has all the typical things you'd find in a synth: hard sync, FM, and hypersaw. It has 4 stereo outputs plus USB 2.0 outs, and the output is I'm not sure if that's just stereo or if it can handle all 4, but the output is 96K and 24-bit, which is interesting. The LFO shapes, there's 64 LFO shapes and 3 LFOs per part, and that's 8 parts, so that's 8 times 3, that's 16, that's 22, 24? Math. And it has an arpeggiator. The really cool thing about the virus is the arpeggiator is like super cool. And another thing that the virus has is the TI aspect, which means total integration. And essentially, there's a VST that you can have on your screen, and you can edit your patches on there and just have your virus TI as a dedicated processor. It was one of those revolutionary things that it had when it first came out. And there's so many other things about the virus. Is the distortion. There's filter distortion, so it's the oscillator section, ring, sub-osc, and I didn't see any specifications of the press release, but it's a field programmable array. I think they can add that. So, but anyway, there's no sub-oscillator, and ring I don't think is there. Taking apart and then adding unison to that. Really cool thing about the virus is you can have 2 hypersaws, which is 16 voices, and then you can have that times 8 by unison. And the cool thing about the hypersaw is an 8-voice hypersaw or an 8 oscillator hypersaw, like that, only takes up 1 voice, and that's pretty cool. And then 16 parts, so 16. That would be basically 8 voices to do that. Anyway, I confused myself. Another thing with the virus I wanted to say is that was the oscillator section. When you get into the filter section, what makes it unique, and I didn't see that on the press release either, is that the virus has a distortion mode that you can change. Rectification's my favorite one. There's so many in the filter section, and then you have a post distortion after the filter. So it's a really unique sound that way that I've yet to see repeated in a synthesizer. But what's my point of this video? I think the future in digital synths is FPGAs, and I think, as always, competition is good. Is the guy that designed the Virus TI and the Kemper profilers, Christoph Kemper, in Germany. I'm sure he's looking at what Waldorf is doing, and maybe this might light a bit of a fire. But yeah, there's just so many. And if the price is what it is rumored to be, which is $2,000 for Kyra, that is very competitive compared to the Virus. And I really hope that it is competitive, and I would really be interested in getting one, because it's like this fun thing. You can just make huge swarmy sounds of doom. And if it's competitive with the Virus, think about the Virus has no competitor. And if Kyra has like a integrated VST thing going on under the hood that they're developing, because it has the USB out, I would really love to see Access Music make a comeback and just release something using the new Shark processors or FPGAs. All these sorts of crazy things that are coming out, because it's been 13 years of advancement in DSP. What can you harness to make a really crazy synth? All sorts of stuff you can do. Crazy modulation, deep modulation, beyond frequency, beyond the frequency of human hearing modulation. You know what I mean? Because once you get that high, you have the aliasing and things like that. What if they're working on it right now? Anyway, that was my video. I'm working on some stuff, and you're going to be seeing a lot more videos in the future. I just want to get one out and just kind of talk about stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned stuff. If you want to do some Google research, Waldorf, Kyra, and the Access Virus TI. But if you've watched my channel, you've probably heard me just rave about this thing. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take care and have a good one.